We might sit for 15 minutes. Is there anybody who has not ever meditated before? You've all meditated before. So then the meditation direction will be very small because you can all all meditate. Somebody's walking through their house as we speak. Okay, so let's let's just find a way to sit comfortably. I think most people are in chairs rather than sitting on the floor. So you sit with your bottom as far back in the chair as you can get it so that your back is nice and straight, but not too stiff or like a ramrod. Your feet flat on the ground, your hands in your lap. Imagine that there is a fishing line attached to the top of your head at one end and then to the ceiling at the other, and your head is bobbing on the end of the fishing line. And then you imagine that you take the fishing line between your thumb and your forefinger and gently pull the fishing line up towards the ceiling so that your back straightens. Allow your shoulders to relax. Allow your nose to be tucked in a little bit, and not your nose, your chin to be tucked in a little, and your nose in line with your abdomen. And close your eyes very gently. And just come to rest in the chair, letting go of all the tensions of the day. Just resting, being at peace within the body. Then become aware of your breathing. Breathing in and breathing out. And as best as you can, keep your attention on your breath. Breathing in, breathing out. Your mind will definitely wander, but that's nothing to worry about. That's normal. The mind goes where it wills. When you notice that your mind has wandered, you very gently bring your attention back to your in-breath and your out-breath. Your in-breath and your out-breath are the anchor that holds your attention. Do the best you can to keep your attention with the in-breath and the out-breath. And enjoy the peace and the calm that comes with that. Breathing in, breathing out, keeping your attention on your in-breath and your out-breath. Breathing in, breathing out. Body and mind at peace. Breathing in, breathing out. Keeping your attention on your in-breath and your out-breath, with body and mind at peace and calm. So very gently bring your attention back into the room. Notice your body in contact with the chair and with itself. You might like to massage your face and your head, your shoulders. If you're stiff, you can roll your shoulders back and forward and stretch. Okay. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. One of those words I love particularly, and that's bhagavato. And so quite often I find myself referring to or talking to the Buddha and calling the Buddha Bhagavan, which is a beautiful word, a beautiful Sanskrit word, and one of my favorites. Before I start the Dhamma talk, I just want to share something that I really am happy about, that's brought a lot of joy to my day. And that is that up here in the Flinders Ranges, where there are lots of smaller towns dotted around the place, I've drawn together. Today there was a group of 6. There would have been 7 of us, but one had to go on a holiday with her husband. Not had to go, she wanted to go. So there were only 6 of us today. And we were all from 6 different towns all around the Lower Flinders Ranges. And one person was a Catholic nun, another person was an Anglican nun. There was one person from Thich Nhat Hanh's tradition, and 2 others who don't have a name for their spiritual path. But we all came together and we did a guided meditation and we had a shared conversation, and it was really beautiful. And the 2 Christian people had never done anything like Buddha's meditation before, but they derived a lot of benefit from it. So it was really lovely to be with people from such different backgrounds and enjoying one another's company. And one of the people, the lady who's involved in Thich Nhat Hanh's group, she said to all of us at the end of the day, she said, why don't we think of a name for our group? And that was a particularly thrilling moment, because people don't want to name something unless they're committed to it. And of course, if you've spent a long time trying to build small sanghas and you finally get a group of people who are really committed to it, that's a great thrill, at least from my point of view. So we had a really lovely day, and it looks like we're going to continue as a meditation group. And a multi-faith meditation group, which is also a great blessing. So I just thought I'd share that with you. Now let me bring up the Dhamma talk. So tonight in our Dhamma sharing, I want to continue to introduce you to the bamboo forest tradition of Vietnamese Zen. That's my tradition. And consider some of the basic Buddhist teachings as expressed by my teacher, the most Venerable Thích Thanh Từ. And interestingly enough, the basic teachings of the Buddha don't really vary at all from one tradition to another. So whatever I say tonight, you will have heard before. But before I do that, I've got a dog knocking at the door wanting to get out. So if you'll excuse me. What it is to be the servant of a dog. There you are. So I'm going to begin the Dhamma talk with 2 stories, one from my own experience and one from a different source altogether. The event that I'm about to describe occurred on April the 29th in 2014, so it's 9 years ago. And it happened when I was the Buddhist chaplain on the Sandy Bay campus of the University of Tasmania. On that morning, I was driving south along the Brooker Highway into Hobart and on my way to the university. It was a little busy, but not rush hour busy. And of course, people like to laugh when I talk about the rush hour in Hobart, but there are such things. I heard behind me a siren, and I thought that it was an ambulance siren. And so I was on alert to make way for it. But to my surprise, it was the police chasing a speeding driver. There turned out to be 3 police vehicles, in fact. And suddenly the getaway car was right next to me. It was driven by a young, chubby man with an intent look on his face. He wasn't angry. He was just intent on getting away from the police. And I noticed also that he was wearing a black hoodie. I moved aside to let him pass. A few minutes later, the police needed to pass, so I moved aside and let them pass too. I wondered what would have happened if I didn't allow the young man to pass, if I had deliberately slowed him down to give the police a chance to catch up with him. I realised I would have colluded with the police in his capture. And to me, that would have been dishonourable. At the same time, I became aware of the fact that this was Hobart, originally in its history, like Sydney, a penal settlement that had waged a deadly war against the Indigenous original inhabitants. It was a very class-ridden society. The young man was coming from the northern suburbs, perhaps Claremont like me, or perhaps from Brighton or Glenorchy or Gagebrook. And in Hobart, there's a distinct class difference between those northern suburbs and the more salubrious suburbs south along from Newtown onwards. And they often talk about there being a flannelette curtain separating the northern suburbs from the southern suburbs. He was coming from the north. And I can still, even to today, see his face, intent, but bound, I think, for Risdon Prison, a place I'd heard a lot about from other chaplains who worked there. Was he just speeding? Had he stolen the car, or was he a burglar or a bank robber? Did he have a licence? Was he a multiple offender? Either way, the magistrate and the police prosecutor were not going to let him get away with very much. And these were thoughts that were going through my mind. Then I thought of all the beautiful little babies I see with their mums who come from the northern suburbs and get into the lift in the Argyle Street car park. This young man was once a baby like them, with his mum, chubby legs and a beautiful little face. He stayed with me all day. Later in the day, I met a young man called George at the university for meditation. We discussed the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path. George is a deep thinker and says he has always been so. I'm curious, George, I said. Here you are, 20 years of age, and you are deeply engaged in thinking about the Buddha's teachings on suffering. You are among the most intelligent of Tasmania's young adults, most of whom are not thinking about suffering in this way. Why is that? George, and it's not his real name, is a very privileged young man, or was a very privileged young man from a large Anglo-Polish family. He grew up in Hobart's middle-class inner suburbs, and from about year 3 he went to the most prestigious private school in Hobart. He comes from a large, loving, extended family, and he still has his 2 intelligent grandmothers, or he did then, 10 years ago nearly, aged 90, so they'd be 100 now. George is very much in charge of his life. He neither wears a black hoodie, nor is he ever likely to be on the run from the police. Still, the young man driving the getaway car was with me. Even later in the day, on my way home in the rain, I called into the Claremont Plaza to do my shopping. On my way out of the Woolworths, with my mind still on the young man driving the getaway car, 2 beautiful young people stopped me. I had met them while walking my dog Lady by the Derwent River the week before. They had a smile on each of their faces. They're teenagers, what that time they were, one in year 10 and the other in year 9. They were boyfriend and girlfriend. The boy is from an Aboriginal family, one of 12 children, well connected and an aspiring AFL player. The young woman's dad brought her home a camera from Japan, and when I saw her the week before, she was taking pictures. They were in love, and they were very hormonal. They looked beautiful together. I was so with my thoughts about the young man driving the getaway car that I couldn't think of anything to say to them. I wished I'd thought to ask them to join me for coffee. I was glad that the whole shopping centre had witnessed these two young people being so loving towards the Buddhist monk. Questions began arising in my mind concerning all three encounters. What's going on here? What is the story from the young getaway man's side? I didn't know. I couldn't tell what had happened in his life. I could only guess. But I do have questions, and the questions were really important. What has led him along this path? What conditions in the lives of all of the young people have enabled them, or the other young people that I met, to do so well? What made their lives so different from the young man driving the car? Where will all four of their lives take them? How much does social class, family life, native intelligence play in their lives? How much of the young car driver's life is driven by habit? What makes it so hard to see habit as habit and thereby change your life? Even habits are the results of causes and conditions. What were all the factors in this life that turned a beautiful baby into a fugitive from the police? And did he bring this possibility with him into this life? These were the questions that came to mind as I continued to reflect on this young man. In the end, I felt very sorry for the young driver. There is, of course, an ideologically based view that he's responsible for his choices. After all, we're all individuals and we're all responsible for our choices. But I'm not sure that they are choices in an absolute sense. I suspect he follows a range of habits blindly. There may be many other related problems that have led to these habits predominating in his behaviour. Maybe he's not very intelligent. Maybe he has not had better resources offered to him in life that would enable him to make better choices. To what extent is he absolutely responsible? The world is full of suffering of one sort and another, arising out of one set of concrete causes and conditions or another. There is, of course, the overcoming of suffering, but how capable are we of it? And is it possible within the space of one lifespan? In the end, I came down on the side of understanding and love rather than blame. In relation to the young man and his behaviour, my own values include the conviction that underneath the dysfunction of his personality rests a Buddha to be, which we must reach out to. So that was one story. The second story comes from an article I read recently by Lachlan Girton, who's Yahoo's senior entertainment reporter, from the front page of my Yahoo email account. And I don't know why I was drawn to read it, but I was. It concerns a man called Tim Dormer, who is a former winner of television's Big Brother, and it was also concerned with his career change. I want to share it here because I think it is a good example of the reality that we human beings are inherently capable of transformation away from a self-centered trajectory in our lives to a path of service focused on the well-being of others. and in Tim Dormer's case, especially on the well-being of people who are vulnerable and not always well valued by our mainstream culture. And so the writer goes on. It's been almost 10 years since Tim Dormer won the 10th season of Big Brother Australia, received $250,000 and became a household name. The reality star who went on to compete on the Celebrity Apprentice, Big Brother Canada and last year's season of the Australian version has since embarked on a surprising career path away from the spotlight. In 2019, Tim decided he had had enough of living life as a self-proclaimed D-grade celebrity and instead became a disability support worker. He says, the 15 minutes of fame train was pulling into the station. I'd had my fun, but it was time to get off. I think I squeezed a lot more than 15 minutes out of it over the years, but I really wasn't finding much reward in that lifestyle anymore. I found myself selling stuff on Instagram and living in the past a little bit, and I kind of wanted to start a new path. Having volunteered with Down Syndrome New South Wales in the past, Tim made the decision to start working as a support carer in a home for people with high disability needs. He says it was a real dive into the deep end crash course, and I loved it. It wasn't about me, it was really hard work, but I felt like I was being challenged, which I hadn't felt in a little while. Tim says he finds support care work really rewarding and encourages others to engage in it. Since then, Tim has been working as an independent support worker through an organisation in New South Wales called Mabel, which you may have heard of, and which gives him the flexibility to choose what location and hours he wants to work. He says, support care work is such a diverse spectrum of care because all the clients have different care needs. But you'd be surprised how much of a difference you can make in someone's life just by showing up. A lot of what I do is just being a friend and being a cheerleader beside all of my clients. It's an amazing relationship I've formed with my clients over the years. Some of them I've worked with for 2 to 3 years now, and I've seen them find work and find independent living, and it's really rewarding. As hard as some days are, I pinch myself that I get paid to do this. So I share these two different stories because questions concerning karma and its fruits are raised in each case. The first question that I've asked myself is this: what is required in a person's experience to enable them to put aside unwholesome mental states and the consequent words and deeds to live virtuously in the world? And the second question is, has the different life experiences of these two men caused their different karmic patterns? In 2 verses from the Dhammapada, the Buddha says this: mind precedes all mental states. Mind is their chief. They are all mind wrought. If with an impure mind, that is, a mind enmeshed in greed, hatred, fear, ignorance, unhealed hurt, etc., a person speaks or acts, suffering follows him, like the wheel that follows an ox. And then in the 10th verse it says, but whoever's mind is purified of these defilements, whose mind is well established in virtue, filled with self-control and truthfulness, is indeed worthy of the yellow robe. So here the Buddha makes it clear that we are responsible for the world we are creating. And this all begins with our thoughts, our perceptions. Thoughts leading to words and actions are referred to as karma in Buddhism. Karma can be either wholesome or unwholesome. Unwholesome or negative thoughts, words and deeds bear unwholesome or negative fruit. Wholesome or positive thoughts, words and deeds bear wholesome or positive fruit. And this is just as those two verses from the Dhammapada point out. Now, there's nothing magic or nothing divine in this law of karma. It's logical, and it's parallel to the scientific principle found in Newton's third law of motion, which states that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So, for example, while swimming, you push the water backward, and then the water in turn pushes you forward. Every action creates its opposite and equal reaction. Most Venerable Thích Thanh Từ claims that for a Buddhist, the initial step on the way consists of transforming the three sources of negative karmas into positive sources of karma. All karma, negative and positive, as I have said already, results from our mind, our speech, and our body, and we can transform negative karma to positive karma. He goes on to say that those who ignore the Buddha's teachings, especially concerning ethics or morality, in this process give free rein to their thoughts and emotions, their words and their actions, thereby producing harmful effects. In doing so, they create not only their own unhappiness, but also that of others in their family and in their society. In the case of Tim Dormer, I can celebrate his transition from a more self-centered life, which he's found not to be fulfilling, to a life of self-giving love. He has, in thought, word, and action, created a wholesome transformation in his life, and the fruit has brought a deep sense of purposefulness. The young man driving the getaway car has, through his thoughts, words and deeds, created much unwholesome karma and will assuredly give rise to very painful consequences for himself and for others. And I think this is not so because he is inherently bad or evil. Inherently, he has the same nature, the same potential as a Buddha. The problem is that he has not understood his own responsibility for the fact that he is, through his thoughts, words and deeds, creating his world, and has not become what my teacher refers to as being the master in his own house. Now, in this instance, because I was never going to be able to meet this young man personally, I can only bear witness to the suffering the young man is making. I can't eliminate it. Not even the Buddha can do that. He can only point the way. So this gives me the opportunity to let go of any sense of power in the life of others that I might cherish. It is a path for me to a deeper humility. So what could I do? What could I do for this young man, whom I couldn't blame, I could only feel some sense of sympathy for? Having borne witness to this event and its implications, the only thing I could think to do was to keep praying for him, not expecting ever to know the outcomes of his life. And this became my prayer. May this young man become more conscious of his habits. May he see the need for change in his life. May he meet the right people who can facilitate that. May he be open to them. And may I never fail to pray for him and for all who suffer. Thích Thanh Từ teaches further that continuous repetition of either wholesome or unwholesome karma creates habits, either wholesome or unwholesome habits. There is a beautiful, I think, and a poetic expression of this reality, and it's found in a small book called Step by Step, Meditations on Wisdom and Compassion by the Cambodian monk Mahagosananda, who says this: "The thought manifests as the word. The word manifests as the deed. The deed develops into the habit into the character. The character gives birth to the destiny. So watch your thoughts with care and let them spring from love born out of respect for all beings. So what I would like to do now, having said that, and probably not having said anything you haven't thought of before, I'd like us to go into our breakout rooms like we did last time and consider together the following question that is in the chat, but you may have to write it down. There's the question there. How have I transformed unwholesome thoughts, words, and deeds in my own life into wholesome thoughts, words, and deeds? And some people might be afraid that this is somehow bragging about myself, but it's not bragging. It's about reflecting on how I have done well in practicing the Dharma and how I can build up my confidence, what we call saddha in Pali or shraddha in Sanskrit. How have I transformed unwholesome thoughts, words, and deeds in my own life into wholesome thoughts, words, and deeds? And so what I'm asking you to do in your group is to have 5 minutes each. So if we can get into groups of 3, that will mean yes, we each have 5 minutes, or you each have 5 minutes to ask this question of yourself and to share an example of how you have transformed unwholesome karma or habits in your own life and turned them into wholesome habits or karma.
Yeah, I have put the questions in the chat. Like, if you want, you can just copy and put it somewhere in your computer or write it down. Because like when you go into breakout room, you probably won't see the questions anymore. Okay.
And we have 15 minutes, and then we'll come back and you can share what you think. So let's just open it up for sharing. You can share what you came up with in your own life as an example of transformation from unwholesomeness to wholesomeness. And also perhaps share either how easy that was or how difficult that was, how challenging that was. And has it remained a permanent feature of your life, that transformation? Or do we regularly slip back into old habits? Given after all that we are human beings. Who would like to go first?
Hi, Thay. Hi, everybody. That last question was a good one for me because I shared that I've changed my sort of unwholesome thoughts about how my family should cooperate in keeping the house tidy, and how that used to cause a lot of tension between the 4 of us. But I definitely do lose that wholesome view still regularly, probably once a month roughly. So I think deep down I haven't really totally extinguished my thoughts or stories or ideas about what I think should be done, or the level of sharing and cooperation and chores around the house. But most of the time I have, and most of the time my words and deeds are much more wise and skillful, and I have a better relationship with my family because of it. But yeah, certainly every now and again, I guess it's on my mind because I did just before I came and joined this group. I had a bit of a unskillful exchange with my daughter about her laundry. But yeah, so thank you.
Yeah, I think Jeff is every parent's agony to have this unwholesome thought. You can't help it. It's either you do it yourself and you create that unhappiness as well. Or you have the argument with them. And they, how do we overcome these unwholesome thoughts about our children? Oh, there you are muted.
You're muted.
I'm muted. Well, I think one of the key ingredients is patience. You have to be patient with yourself. Things that are deeply rooted habits and are not going to change overnight, and not necessarily just because through willpower. We can't necessarily make decide on the basis of reason and then will ourselves to change. That doesn't work either, because habits are deeply ingrained. So we have to start out with being patient with ourselves, and each time just come, like in meditation, you come back to the breath. Well, in ordinary life, you come back to your wholesome intention, and then you start again. You begin anew, and then and just maintain the whole of your practice and trust that will lead you into a transformation. But I don't think any of it's easy, and that's why I don't think there's any point in blaming other people for their bad habits. Like, for example, the young man, Thich Nhat Hanh says that blaming never helps. Only love and understanding can help a person change. And I think that that's just really true. So, it's the cultivation of love and understanding and patience with yourself that makes it possible. And it still might take a long time.
I think if I could just recollect the nature of my work, because I do a lot of design work with computer systems before, and when I do design, I always have to share the design with a lot of people in the corporation, in the bank, for example, and we call this peer reviews, if you like. Yeah. And you get criticized and commented on the work. A lot of senior executives would give their 2 cents worth, and some of them can be quite nasty in the comments. So, and when you receive, when I receive a nasty feedback, for example, there is always the human reaction to react negatively. So you get, but I know that there's no point in doing that, because you got to have a professional approach towards a negative feedback from a peer review. So that's very often you tell yourself, or I tell myself, to respect the other person's view, no matter how critical it is, and to remind myself that person, with that critical comment, has their own interests at heart, has their own thoughts that they like to express. They may be expressing a fairly negative comment on a particular proposal that I made, but then I have to, and in order for the job to continue harmoniously within a project, and these are big projects I get involved in, you've got to somehow consider absorbing the other person's point of view without creating disharmony. So that's my sort of experience from a work sort of perspective. And that happens within sometimes within the family environment too, I guess. But that's my thought about this in terms of reacting to an unwholesome comment from others. Thank you.
So Hian, could that be like swallowing the like that? It's not like you're accepting willingly, but you kind of like force yourself to swallow that pride or something. Does it?
It's not exactly swallowing the pride, but you've got to retain your sense of self-respect when you do that, and it also means you're respecting the other person's approach, although it may not be a positive approach towards you.
Something like let's agree to disagree.
Sometimes that's yeah.
Yeah, it's not easy.
Agreeing to disagree can happen more often than you think. If you're involved in negotiations often in work, for example, and in lots of peer reviews. It happens very often. I guess through the years, as you get older, you become more mature in the sense at dealing with this sort of situations. If you're younger, you're more, when you're younger, you're probably more emotional. You can be more aggressive about it. That's how I felt. It gets better with age.
I'm just thinking that before one wants to transform anything, I guess you have to identify that it is unwholesome, or it's something that you want to stop and do something differently. And I guess that a little bit with what you were saying, Hen, that, you know, as one becomes older, and I guess it may also be as one becomes more mindful or still or meditates or, you know, tries to follow more of a spiritual or Buddhist path, that we can more easily identify or listen when other people identify that some of our thoughts and words and deeds are unskillful, you know. But if you don't, I mean, I'm just thinking for myself, if I can't see that the habits are harming me or others, then why would I even consider changing them or transforming them?
Anyone else?
In our group of three, one of us started by responding in the general sense, but the main message seemed to be it requires non-judgmentalness to transform our unwholesome whatever, that we mustn't, when we judge the other, then we will have unwholesome thoughts, actions, and deeds. Another person in the group talked about how through metta meditation, that person had learned to transform the anger towards someone, like what Hian was saying, anger towards perhaps what Hian was saying. It's very easy to get very angry at someone. Sometimes it's not even the contents of the feedback, but the way the feedback is delivered can make us react with unwholesome anger, isn't it? But with the practice of loving kindness to everyone, especially loving kindness to our enemy, you know, or to a difficult person to us, that can transform our reactive anger towards them. And the third person in the group brought in the concept of forgiveness. So in the transformation, unwholesome to wholesome, often there needs to be some measure of forgiving the other, and sometimes some measure of forgiving ourselves for our own unwholesome thoughts and deeds. So that was a great discussion, I thought, the three of us. But just before the session ended, I came up with a question arising, and I think the question was also there in my mind when you talked about that young man in the getaway car, and then I thought it was interesting there you wondered after the event when you reflected, should you have stopped or try to go slowly so that that baddie, shall I call him? That's a judgmental word, isn't it? Or that young man will be taken care of by the law. Yeah? Or should you have just let him go, which you did? Yeah. It raised a question in my mind often. Whilst I appreciate and understand the Buddha's teachings is all non-judgmental, so that even if something bad happens, he says that badness is due to ignorance, rather than judging the other as evil or bad. I think that's a fundamental, very powerful teaching. But it raises the question, is there anywhere in Buddhist teachings, Thay, is there anywhere in any sutta that the Buddha talks about any fundamental evilness in the human condition? Because, like, I mean, even in the case of Angulimala, whatever that terrible fellow's name is.
Angula.
I mean,
Angulimala.
Angulimala.
It's very easy. It's a nice story. I want to believe it, that all the Buddha needed to do was say, I've stopped running, but you haven't stopped. But as if just that removes a huge amount of evilness.
Yeah.
Is there any teaching, any saying from the Buddha to subscribe to the notion that there can be some basic evilness, fundamental evilness, whether we're all born with it or whether some people have a large measure of it?
You will be interested to know that I've prepared a paper for the Association of Buddhist Psychiatrists, and what you've invited me into, and a number of things you've said I've already included in the paper, including the story of Angulimala. The really wonderful thing I think about that story is that the Buddha never judges Angulimala for his behavior, and his behavior is amongst the worst that humans can perpetrate against one another. That is murder. And it's not only that he doesn't judge Angulimala, but he gives him a way out. And he depends on Angulimala's desire to change and to take that way out. And so Angulimala does take that way out, and then he becomes a bhikkhu almost immediately, or something like that. So to my mind, I've never ever come across the notion in Buddhism that there's this inherent evil in us. Unlike in some versions of Christianity, there's the notion of original sin. There is only what you said, avijja, ignorance. And the interesting thing about avijja is that it's a Pali word, and Pali is an Indo-European language. In Latin, in the Pali word avijja, you've got two parts. You've got the prefix "a," which negates what follows. So we have, for example, in English, anaerobic, which means the "a" or "an" negates the aerobic aspect. So in Latin, for example, and in Greek, you have the same form as you have in Pali and Sanskrit. negates what's following. Vijja is the root of the word to see, and the Latin word for seeing is videre. Vid in vij is the same. They're the same words, and they mean to see. So avijja means not seeing, and it's not just not knowing, but it's not seeing in the first place. But that's not something you can be judged for. That's about the difficulties in perceiving things are right, and it's not easy to have the right perception or the right thought about things. Our minds can trick us, but we can get tricked into perceiving things differently from the way they actually are. So I don't think that in Buddhism there is the notion of evil, and there is also, from my point of view, the notion that anybody, including people like Adolf Hitler, are still fundamentally, they still have the nature of a Buddha. It's just that they've accumulated a whole lot of unwholesome habits and ways of thinking that get in the road of that. But it doesn't mean to say that they won't eventually become enlightened beings. That's the great hope, is that we're all on our way out. We're all on our way towards enlightenment. So I can't, it doesn't make sense from my own experience and thinking about Buddhism since I got involved in it in 1978 to imagine that there is evil. And Angulimala is a good story that illustrates that. Angulimala just goes around wantonly killing people, and then he encounters the Buddha, who is able to assist him to think differently about things. And I mean, of course, it's a story, and it may well have happened or it may not have happened. But the point is, it's a story that that illustrates this notion that we are capable. We have within us the capacity to transform what's previously been unwholesome. And so there's nothing permanent about there's no permanent notion of evil, and I've got a black stain on my heart, and that can only be changed by, well, no, I'm not going to say that because I'm not opposed to Jesus, but yeah, I don't think there is a notion of evil. I think what there is a notion of compassion, which includes working hard to understand why a person has done what they've done and how might I support them in changing, in becoming, wholesome living beings. That would seem to me to be the whole purpose of the Buddha's journey, really, and his teaching of us how to transform that avijja, that ignorance, that hatred, that greed, into understanding and generosity and love. That's my view. I might be wrong entirely, but I can't see any point in a notion of evil. I don't think nothing is permanent, not even Adolf Hitler's evil or whomever's evil. I mean, Adolf Hitler's the archetype of evil since the Second World War. But it could be Pol Pot, or it could be anybody.
Yeah.
I don't see it as permanent. Things change all the time.
Yeah. Well,
Thay, can I add to that? I think the Buddha propounds that we are the way we are because of innumerable causes and conditions.
Yeah.
And had I been subject to the same causes and conditions as Angulimala, I might have ended up in the same place. But and he does give Angulimala the way out, but when Angulimala complains to him that the townspeople, the villagers hate him and they throw rocks at him and abuse him, he says, well, you just have to bear it, Angulimala. This is the fruit of your actions.
And the people didn't even trust that he'd changed, even when he was.
They did not. They would.
not so easily forgiven.
No.
Yeah.
And that is the fruits of his unwholesome action,
Yeah. Yeah.
And we do have to bear that, you know, there's no
There's no quick way out. It's not absolute forgiveness and you're right, you're transformed. It's a long process of overcoming those causes and conditions.
And the Buddha hasn't taken it away. The Buddha's not a savior in that sense. He hasn't taken it away. He's just pointed you in the direction of a better path to take, really.
It's really a very good discussions, and everyone seems to enjoy the discussions, and we forgot to watch the time. We have reached over the time. Like everybody's that's a good thing, that nobody's actually even realized that it's that late. So we're enjoying this session very much today.
It's 9:02 in Sydney, is it?
Yes, it is. And now just before that, I don't know whether you have read this message from Patricia to thank you, Thay, so much for your teaching. And Patricia says she was especially touched by the prayer you made for the young man. And I hope he's doing well in his life today. And that also really touched my heart. I hope that from now onwards, if any one of us, you will have to meet any road bully or anyone that cut into your lane, just think about what they say about he too or she too also come from, a pure place like all of us. And then something has happened and to make him or her become like that. So have that compassion for those people. Yeah.
So I just say that I think that what I learned from what I'm doing at the moment is that a lot of my teachers' teachings some of them have been translated directly from Vietnamese to English by Vietnamese speakers, and some of the translations are pretty terrible, really. And I feel sorry about that, because I don't want people to look at my teachers' teachings and think they don't make any sense or anything like that. So what I've been given was a series of books translated from Vietnamese to French, and because Vietnam was a French colony and a lot of older Vietnamese people had a French education, the French translations are much better than the English translations. And so I'm translating a lot of the work from French to English at the moment. And what I discovered in the first book that I'm translating is that now I've forgotten. Oh yes, the teaching is basically that our primary job when we come to the Dharma is this whole question of facing up to karma, and to what we think, what we do, and what we think, what we say, and what we do, and transforming that constantly in line with the precepts. So it's pretty straightforward, and it's not particularly mystical. It seems to me to be very clear cut and reasonable and sensible, which is one of the things that's always attracted me to the Dharma, is that it makes sense to me. Okay, and next month I won't be with you.
You will. Date next month is July, 29th of July. Yeah, it's August that I'll give you a break.
Is it June now?
Yeah, it's still June.
Okay, I'll see you in July, but in August I won't be here. But in July I'm doing an online retreat with a Soto Zen monastery in the United States, and I'm really looking forward to it. So to have that month off from giving a Dharma talk will be very helpful in terms of immersing myself in that retreat.
Oh, okay. Right. Okay. So before we end, they will give a blessing.
Yeah. May the wholesome energy that we have generated here tonight and at any other time be for the benefit of all living beings. May all living beings be well and happy. May all living beings be free from suffering. May all living beings know peace and joy and the causes of peace and joy. And may we all continue to walk the Buddha's path of truth and love together. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu.